Hey everyone, and welcome to Comic Breakdown. If you are new to the channel, please be sure to hit that sub button and like this video if you enjoy the content that we have coming out. And today we're going to be diving into X-Men 10 of Swords Part 12 of 22. This will be X-Men issue number 14. Now, if you guys have not been keeping up with 10 of Swords, I'll leave a link in the description and at the top of the video. You guys can check out everything Ten of Swords related. Now, we're getting a little over the halfway mark here when it comes to the Ten of Swords line. And it's really been slowly progressing through this. I really feel like they're drawing this out quite a bit. You know, they definitely could have done this in 15, 16 issues, I'd say. In our last issue, we left off with Apocalypse running into Genesis and all of our heroes preparing for a banquet, kind of a last meal before the Mortal Kombat style tournament takes place. So without further ado, let's dive into this issue. So in this issue, we pick up at the Starlight Citadel, and Apocalypse is really out in the garden just contemplating everything that he's discovered and he's learned from all of this. Now, while Apocalypse is doing this, Genesis comes up and they start to have a conversation. And really, we've seen a whole new side of Apocalypse with this. You know, I know a lot of people haven't liked the retcon that's going on. They haven't liked this softer side of Apocalypse, but I have to say it's really humanized him for me. You know, I've always seen him as the big bad villain of sorts and never put much depth to his character, but that's what this story is doing. It's really driving the depth of who Apocalypse is and why he's done everything he's done up until this point. You know, love it or hate it, you know, it is what it is now. So the conversation goes along, and Apocalypse is telling her, you know, I really want peace. You know, just for this time being, what tomorrow brings is going to be chaos. And in this moment, I just want a little bit of solitude. And for her to hear Apocalypse say things like this, it really makes her feel like he's fallen from the man that she knew. But at the same time, she's not the same person either, because she stands there saying these things, but also wielding the Twilight Sword, the one that divided the lands, the one sword that caused everything that they're dealing with now. But Genesis really came here to talk, to tell him how everything happened, how she came to hold the sword. And so they go hand in hand through the garden, and she really breaks down the story from her perspective of what happened. You know, and some of this is rehashing. You know, they talk about the Twilight Sword and the worlds being torn into two, chaos coming from Ameth, etc., etc. And she tells him, you know, the separation, him having to stay behind, the separation of husband from wife and parent from child, Arako from Krakoa. You know, these were not things she took lightly. And at the end, she's not even sure if it was worth it. Now, part of the story that we don't know is as soon as it was sealed off, as soon as that chasm had sealed off and Apocalypse was on the other side, mutants that stayed behind with Genesis, about 1/10 of them, hundreds of mutants fled, either because they lost their mind or they were just scared. But within the first hour, they had lost 1/10 of their strength. If it weren't for the White Sword and his 100 champions buying them time, they may not have been able to build and construct their 10 towers of defense, the armor of Aroka. And for generations, this stood. For generations, mutants never knew defeat, at least not here. But they lived inside the walls this entire time, and Ameth was on the other side waiting. And against the better judgment of her prophets, she took out her army, and she waged war against Ameth itself. And so day after day, they battled hordes. And it wasn't until they ran into purity, they ran into the lost White Sword, that they really tasted defeat for the first time. You know, their greatest healer, an external, an immortal, the White Sword, had become more of a zombie for death and mayhem, for war. All he knew was to wake every day with his 100 champions and slay. It became his religion. And with that, her forces were drove back. Genesis retreated. And upon arriving home, she finds out that her sister, Iska, had betrayed her. And it stung such a deep blow to her. But Annihilation, the Golden Helm, invited her to a parlay. And her sister begged Genesis to go. So she decides, you know, for the sake of my sister, for the sake of my people, I will go to this parlay. I'll see what words Annihilation has to tell me. And upon arriving in their little capital city, she finds out something really freaking interesting here. So all the mutants who had fled in the crossing, that 10% of mutants that were lost to the wasteland, she finds out what happened to all of them. What they thought for thousands of years of battle, the enemy was really just biding their time. They were creating a new army, breeding the mutants that they had captured with amethyst demons to produce a hybrid warrior race. Essentially, they were creating, super mutants, if you will, an army that could literally take on anything. And of course, this enrages Genesis. Like, these were her people at one time, and now they're no longer that. After generations and generations, they've been bred into what they are today. Now, Annihilation originally offered a kind of peace, but Genesis, being herself, offered her sword instead. And not to parlay or be friends, but to fight to the death. And that's what she did. She fought. She fought for all of them. And she won. She destroyed Annihilation, took her life, took her head, and in doing so, unknowingly sacrificed her own life. Because at the time, she didn't know what victory meant. She didn't know what the cost was. Whoever defeats the helm claims the helm. Whoever wears the crown controls the land. It's called Annihilation for a reason. The golden helm is the only thing that keeps the Amethyst Horde in check. Without it, the demons of the dark world essentially go on their own and destroy and kill everything. And for 100 years, Genesis chose not to wear the helmet. And so for 100 years, she watched it as this mad horde army destroyed their pillars of defense, destroyed and murdered mutants as the towers fell. And still she refused to do anything. And when they go to find help, when they go to find Apocalypse and the others, they realize that the army on the other side, the army on Earth, the world they're trying to save, isn't what it once was. And so with this knowledge, she placed the golden helm on her head because she felt like there was no other way to secure a victory, to save what was left of her people. And she'd hoped to control it, to dominate it, but she failed. And Annihilation marched its horde into her home, and everyone surrendered. But this helm wants it all. It doesn't just want them. It wants every world and other worlds. And Apocalypse is really convinced that she can fight this off, that she can overcome the power of the helm. And she's just like, no. Like, no one is that strong. Like, not even me. I fight for it, and now it wants everything, and so do I. So whatever the helm wants, I want. And most of all, she wants Krakoa. And Apocalypse tells her straight up, like, it's not for taking. He's like, I've built something there. Like, for all mutants, to include our children and you. And her fear is that it can't last. That because Apocalypse is so weak now, because he's become so soft, and he's raised soft mutants, that there's no way what he's built could ever sustain for a long period of time. And that will be the end of this issue. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments. This was really our brief history. A lot of it we already really knew, honestly. In the last 12 issues, they've covered quite a bit of this stuff. So it was really just a story from Genesis' perspective on exactly what happened. And it's becoming more and more that Genesis and our people aren't necessarily evil or bad guys. Really, it's starting to look like Saturnine is really the true enemy behind all this. And I would really like to see all of these guys team up against her and overthrow the Starlight Citadel. Maybe find a way to control or get rid of the golden helm of Annihilation. Because in the next issue, we'll talk more about this because Wolverine definitely hits on it. It just seems like this is all one giant game, but both sides are relatively good. They're both mutants on both sides. And more than that, but their family, their friends, their loved ones, their brothers, their sisters, their wives. This is something Apocalypse, this is something Genesis doesn't necessarily want to do, but they both want to do something for the betterment of mutant kind as a whole. So yeah, if you guys have not yet, please be sure to like and subscribe to the page, leave some comments, and until the next video.